All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we making up plays. You talking the game, get you to the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, they working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays.
Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, September 1st, 10:01 on the East Coast. Welcome to ASAP in the morning. My name is Craig Campbell, and very shortly we'll be joined by a few others on the regular morning show. But I wanted to welcome everyone this morning, and first and foremost, if you haven't had a chance, or if you're just now tuning in for the first time, watching ASAP in the morning, go ahead and leave a like, a comment, and share the stream wherever you're watching. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. So don't forget to like and share the stream. You can find us on Facebook at All Sports All Plays, on Twitter at ASAP Network 1, and on YouTube, just search ASAP Sports Network so you can find all of the great content here on the All Sports All Plays Network. Well, while we're waiting for a few other guys to join this morning, we'll go ahead and talk about some breaking news. And some of that breaking news is Russell Wilson signed a monster contract extension this morning. It was first released by Adam Schefter this morning. Russell Wilson and the Broncos reached an agreement of 5 years, $245 million, includes $165 million guaranteed. So now Russell Wilson is tied to Denver for 7 total years and $296 million. To kind of put this into perspective, the mega deal is the third most lucrative contract in NFL history in terms of guaranteed money. The only two that are ahead of him, Deshaun Watson's record $230 million, and Kyler Murray's recent $189.5 million guaranteed contract. So the Broncos are really going all in on Russell Wilson. They're taking Russell Wilson and they're just saying, hey, we're going to give you the reins. It's your offense. They need some stability at quarterback. They really haven't had that since Peyton Manning retired but won them a Super Bowl. And that's the goal. So the new ownership group, they've been making some moves. They wanted to get this deal done with Russell Wilson. And it looks like they've done just that. So now Russell Wilson, this went out by Field Yates this morning, just about an hour ago, talking about the top five highest paid QBs in annual value. This contract now places Russell Wilson at number 2, behind only Aaron Rodgers. Behind only Aaron Rodgers as the top paid quarterback by value in the NFL. And that's a pretty interesting list of names that he's put himself into that company. Russell Wilson is not top 10 guy going into the season. That's an interesting comment. So Russell Wilson carried the Seattle offense for a long time with a few weapons, but not many. Top 10, there's a lot of great quarterbacks in the league. I would be interested to hear who you think are the 9 other guys ahead of him. There are a lot of great quarterbacks that are at his level and even better than Russell Wilson. But I don't know. It's a tough call for top 10. I think he is a top 10 quarterback. But I'd love to hear who the other people on that list would be. And good morning. Dustin is also joining us this morning. Edwin Diaz has the best intro song in MLB history. I loved that I love that Timmy Trumpet came in to New York and said he's going to play his intro whenever he play. He had to actually stay multiple nights just for Edwin Diaz to have the opportunity to pitch that night. So that was really cool. I watched that last night. That would have been awesome to see and hear live. But yeah, I agree. That was one of so I'm a writer and managing editor for a website called Overtime Heroics, and they released the top intro songs for closers every year. They kind of do a new list, and Edwin Diaz is at the top of the list the back-to-back years. So that was pretty cool that Timmy Trumpet came in to play that intro music for Edwin Diaz. Oh, got to get my coffee this morning. Fantastic. But back to Russell Wilson. So how he was acquired, if you remember, how he's acquired by the Broncos. The Broncos traded 5 draft picks, including 2 first rounds, 2 second round selections, and 3 players to get Russell Wilson. So now why this is such a big deal? Why is it such a big deal that Russell Wilson's getting this monster contract if some can argue that he's not a top 10 quarterback? I don't agree with that. But if some can argue that, okay, he's not a top 5 guy in the league right now, so why is he getting paid like a top 5 quarterback in the league? Let's kind of drop some knowledge here for everybody. Last year in 2021, Broncos went 7-10. All right. Their expected win-loss should have been 8-9. Somewhere around 8 wins. They lost one of the games they were supposed to win. But bigger than that, offensive rankings for the Denver Broncos. And this is from Pro Football Reference. Points for, they were 23rd. Their offense was 23rd. So not even the top half of the league in points for. They were in the bottom half of the league in total yards. In the passing categories, they didn't have many interceptions. They were top 5 in interceptions thrown, but they were 25th in touchdowns, 19th in passing yards. They were 16th in net yards per attempt. Their time of possession, their average drive was 3 minutes, which was top 5 in the league, so that wasn't the problem. But the passing here was the problem. Rushing, they were middle of the road. They were right around 10 to 15 in a majority of categories in all of rushing in NFL. But the passing game is what they're looking at, because you had Bridgewater, Locke, Ripien as your 3 quarterbacks. Bridgewater went 7-7 in his starts. Locke went 0-3. So Nats Dad 82. Mahomes, Brady, Rodgers, Allen, Stafford, Herbert, Jackson, Burrow, Prescott, Murray, and Cousins. That's a good list. I would actually argue that while Kirk Cousins does have some sneaky good numbers, I would personally take Russell Wilson over Kirk Cousins. And depending on the health of Dak Prescott, I might take him over Dak Prescott as well. Lamar Jackson, we talked about him a lot yesterday. There are a lot of things he does well. He's an elite athlete. He's got to take that next step in development. Jackson's obviously, I think, right around that conversation as well. But I would take Russell Wilson over at least 2 of those guys. Now, part of that, if you want to talk about Dak Prescott, part of that was also the play calling of Kellen Moore. Fantastic offensive play caller. And he was able to do some things with a bunch of weapons there. Probably one of the next head coaches in the NFL, considering if the offense for the Cowboys continues to produce at the high level it was producing. He's one of those guys in that conversation with Eric Bieniemy, Byron Leftwich. I think is another guy that could get an NFL job soon. Just within a few other guys, Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator for the Lions, Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator for the Lions. A lot of those guys also are kind of on that list to be next head coaches. So I would argue that part of Prescott's numbers and why he is kind of in that conversation is due to the fact that the play calling. Yes, you have to go execute, but if you have terrible play calling, that's also going to affect your offense. It's going to affect a lot of different things, the offense. So I would argue that Russell Wilson is a top 10 quarterback. He has the most, what was the stat I saw this morning? He has the most touchdown passes over the first 10 years of his career, more than any other active quarterback. And he's only about 8 touchdowns behind Peyton Manning through his first 10 years. So if you want to make that argument, that's kind of how I would counter. That's how I would counter. Russell Wilson is in that echelon of top 10 quarterbacks. And looking at how the offensive weapons that they have for this next coming season, you're going to bring back a lot of players. You still have Jerry Jeudy. You got rid of Noah Fant, so that was needs more help than most. I would counter that with what weapons if he needs more help than most. You saw the offensive numbers that Seattle was putting up. Doesn't always translate to wins, especially when their defense, the Legion of Boom, was coming down to earth, and those guys were all getting big contracts and or leaving and or digressing, or I should say regressing. Russell Wilson was able to do more with less, a la an Aaron Rodgers, to where their offense was still putting up. He was still putting up big numbers. Some of that might have been garbage time for various reasons, but I don't necessarily think that that's. I understand the argument, but if you look at the rosters that he was working with the last few years in Seattle, they were not trying to put weapons around him. And he still was able to put up big time passing numbers in Seattle. So that would be my counter argument for that. But look at the wide receiver room in Denver right now. Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick's on the IR. At the tight end position, they don't really have anyone right now that could be like a Noah Fant. Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Those are very two good options. Tyler Lockett's been sneaky good, underrated as a wide receiver. So that I can give you. And I think those two players, those are different. Those are slightly different arguments. Slightly different arguments that Russell Wilson versus Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is a more dynamic player with his feet as far as being a threat to bust a 60-yard run and be able to put guys in his dust. Russell Wilson's not necessarily going to do that, but he can get out of the pocket to make plays to look downfield and hit those long bombs, which Lamar Jackson still needs to work on. So we could make that argument all day, but what this move does for the Broncos is it now puts them in position where they said they wanted to change the direction and compete for the division, get back to the playoffs, win up another potential Super Bowl. this is a move that you're telling Russell Wilson that, all right, then now to now your point, the time is up for excuses. Okay, we're paying you this money. We want you to end your career here because we want you to produce the way you were producing in Seattle to help lead a team to a Super Bowl. And that's what the Broncos are doing right here. So what they need to do now is they need to hope essentially that guys can stay healthy. Their defense needs to be able to keep up with the offenses in this division. And that's something, if some of the other guys that are able to jump on later this morning, I'd love to have conversations with them about how we feel the AFC West is going to shape out. If we don't, I can give my picks, have these guys give their picks tomorrow. So that'd be something to pay attention to for them. But their defense last year statistically was they were top 3 in points. They were top 10 in yards against. So if that defense can still maintain its consistency and still play to the level that they played last year, really what the Broncos were missing last year was quarterback play. That's really the big vacuum that they had, was they were missing that quarterback play. And given what they were able to go out and do, I think they take a big step forward. But you got to assume that defenses from year to year are hard to maintain that level of consistency that the Seattle Seahawks had, that some of those great defenses have. Pittsburgh Steelers had done it for a number of years. So can the Denver Broncos be able to maintain that consistency on defense to be a top 10 defense? If you have a top 10 defense, you add Russell Wilson at quarterback, and you can get some decent production out of the other guys around him, Denver's a sneaky pick to make the playoffs. I think it would be as a wild card, but they're a sneaky pick to make the playoffs. This division is going to be really tough. Let's throw that out. Let's throw that out there. This division is going to be really tough. So if Russell Wilson, they're basically doing what they're hoping he's going to do is pull from what he did from Seattle, be able to extend plays if the offensive line breaks down or the play breaks down. They still have Melvin Gordon. I would find it a little ironic if, say, Philip Lindsay got cut. All right, Philip Lindsay, hometown kid from Denver. What if he goes back to where he had some success? I mean, if you're the Denver Broncos, you can never have enough good running backs. Yeah, you can't get them all touches, but somebody goes down with injury, or Melvin Gordon's not the same guy he used to be. So if you can get some of those weapons and add them in, including with Russell Wilson, now you've got a team that can push for the playoffs. And that's what this move is for. They're telling not only Russell Wilson, but the rest of the division, hey, we're making a push for the playoffs. And that's what that move's all about. So we'll move on to some other news for the day. This happened. This news came out yesterday afternoon. Philadelphia Eagles trading former first-round draft pick Jalen Reagor to the Minnesota Vikings. It was a move that kind of surprised a lot of people. Not only the surprise that the Philadelphia Eagles passed up on a guy named Justin Jefferson, who is now Jalen Reagor's teammate from that same draft class. Philadelphia Eagles have not had good, or they haven't had good success with drafting wide receivers. But now this move, the reason why it's, I think, such a big surprise that this move is being made is that the Eagles aren't getting really anything in return. They're not getting anything in return. They get a 7th round draft pick in 2023, this upcoming draft. That's a guy who might make your roster next year. Maybe. Maybe not. And a 2024 conditional 4th round draft pick that is based on production of Jalen Reagor in Minnesota's offense. So if he doesn't meet certain statistics throughout the year, that's going to downgrade to a 5th round pick. So I would love to hear your comments in the comment section here. But Jalen Reagor was drafted 21st overall. And I mentioned he was drafted just ahead of Justin Jefferson, who's now his teammate. But Reagor in 2 seasons has only caught 65 yards and just under 700 yards. It's 695 and 3 touchdowns. That's a season that the Eagles were expecting to have in a single season, let alone 2 seasons. So you got to be disappointed if you're an Eagles fan. Yeah, you've got you brought in AJ Brown, you got some more weapons that you're utilizing for Jalen Hurts. But it's got to hurt a little bit. It's got to hurt a little bit to have a guy that you drafted in the 1st round get rid of him after 2 seasons, going into his 3rd season, just getting rid of him for essentially, I like to say, for a bag of chips. You just traded him for a bag of chips that you don't know how long you're going to have that. So that's got to be disappointing. But to look at where Jalen Reagor fits in to the Minnesota wide receiver room, they've already got, as the aforementioned, Justin Jefferson. You've still got Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne. So those are their top 3 wide receivers already. They're looking at depth. Some of the other guys that are on their roster, BC Johnson, who suffered a torn ACL last week, so he's out. You need somebody to kind of fit in. They had rookie Jalen Naylor. They're essentially down to 4 wide receivers. They had to waive one of their other wide receivers to bring in Jalen Reagor. So at best, Jalen Reagor is going to be their 3rd wide receiver, 3rd, maybe, probably 4th. And in that kind of an offense, when they're going to be focused on running the ball with Dalvin Cook, I don't know how much production Jalen Reagor is going to get. That draft pick to me is probably going to fall to a 5th because they didn't really specify what the statistical requirements are, but it's got to be say like 500 yards, something fairly minuscule, you would think, as a wide receiver to be able to achieve in a season. But Jalen Reagor is probably going to be that 4th wide receiver on this roster for the Minnesota Vikings. I'd be very interested to see if he can break into that top 3. They're not going to run a lot of 4 or 5 wide receiver sets. 2 and 3 wide receiver sets, absolutely. But 4 wide receiver sets, I don't see them utilizing a lot of 4 wide sets. So Jalen Reagor most likely is going to go to Minnesota, finish out the rest of his deal. He's still only 23, so he's still got a long potential career ahead of him. But now for him, he's got to progress to just make sure he can make the roster next year. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't meet those, if he doesn't fit in well to the offense, or if he doesn't progress the way that he should progress going into his 3rd season. He ends up getting cut after next year or next spring. And then it's another former 1st round draft pick that just fizzles out after a couple of years. So that's some of the big news around the NFL. Of course, we talked yesterday on the morning show about, Dustin, this is a big trade for Minnesota because it does fill in that 4th wide receiver spot. But given the production of Jalen Reagor, like I said, over the last 2 years in Philadelphia, he's been a bit, dare I say the word, bust. He's been a bit of a bust in Philadelphia over the first 2 seasons, but that is an asset that he has that he can bring to Minnesota. Being that fourth wide receiver, could return some punts. That might help keep him on the roster. But they got to make sure that he's a guy that can continue to progress and continue to stay on the roster. He didn't have, as far as how his he returned a few punts his first year. He did return punts for Philadelphia last year in 21. No touchdowns, but he had, in his punt returns, he only averaged 7 yards a return in his 31 punt returns last year. But his first year, he only returned 4 punts. He only returned 4 punts, but he did have a touchdown. So he's got 1 touchdown through 2 years. He's getting about 20 yards a kick return last year. So that's an interesting facet to his game that perhaps the Minnesota Vikings could utilize. Cousins is better than Hurts and Minshew. I like Minshew. I like Minshew. I think he got a raw deal in Jacksonville. I know it's not Trevor Lawrence. However, Minshew is able to do with little to no talent on that team. He was able to actually put them in games where they could win. And he fits the persona of Jacksonville. Having lived there and experienced that place myself, he fit Jacksonville, Duval County to a T. That was the perfect quarterback. And I said this to a friend of mine yesterday. If Gardner Minshew wasn't 6'1", if he was 6'3", 6'4", I know those 2 to 3 inches matter. Pause. But if he's a 6'4" quarterback being able to do what he can do, it's the much different conversation for Gardner Minshew. And I would not be surprised if Jalen Hurts does not continue to progress, because he's got to learn how to read defenses better. Going into the next season, defenses are going to have a lot of tape on him now, and he's got to continue to read the defense, throw balls down the field instead of tuck and run, and rely on, okay, the reads aren't there, I'm going to tuck and run. Extend plays, a la a guy that we were just talking about, Russell Wilson, extend plays and throw the ball down the field. But if he's not able to do that, I wouldn't be surprised if Gardner Minshew starts a few games for the Eagles next year. I said it. But back to Jalen Reagor, real quick. He's got a lot to prove still. In this next season. And if he can't do that, he's going to find himself looking for a new job in the next year or two. But some other NFL news. We talked a little bit about waiver claims yesterday, and it was waiver day. You had a lot of cuts being made, getting down to the 53-man roster. Now you see some subsequent moves. Some players getting outright signed, picked up, waived, guys clearing the waivers, put on the practice squad. Lots of movement yesterday in the NFL. The Chicago Bears made a lot of moves yesterday. They had an NFL high 6 players claimed off of waivers, and a guy we talked about yesterday on the show, offensive lineman Alex Leatherwood, was picked up by the Chicago Bears. Former first-round pick by the Las Vegas Raiders. A bit surprising of a move, even though he hasn't really progressed. He still had a lot of time on his deal, and yeah, he struggled at right tackle. They moved him to right guard. But I'm a little surprised that Josh McDaniels and company decided to cut ties with him so early. And I don't really know what the thought process was behind this. Because if it was say something like, I believe Mike Mayock was the guy that still drafted him, Leatherwood, and a few other guys who had been essentially removed from the team since the new regime and has come in Las Vegas. I don't know if it's an indictment on that previous regime, but Alex Leatherwood, former first round pick, drafted number 17. He did struggle a bit, but what guy is going to come out? Not everyone's going to come out and be a huge success in their rookie year, in their first, you like to see a big step forward from year 1 to year 2, but a lot of guys aren't huge successes in their first season. We got to get out of this expecting guys in their first year as a rookie to come in and light up the league. It's happening in all sports. We are in a position as sports fans that we want all the immediate returns right now. We want the immediate returns right here, right now. You're a first round. I'll take for example a guy I know a little bit more about, Jeff Okudah in Detroit. Number 3 pick overall. Probably was drafted too high by Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. But nonetheless, you're drafted number 3 as a corner. You're expected to be a lockdown corner, Deion Sanders type guy. And those expectations are way too high. But he gets hurt in his first year, comes back, gets hurt in his second year. And now all of a sudden, Detroit fans had turned on him so quickly, been labeling him a bust. They need to cut him, cut ties. He's a young corner that still needs to learn the NFL system. I shouldn't say speed, because the first year, the NFL speed gets a lot of guys. But by the second year, they should be a little bit better acclimated to the NFL speed. But having this expectation of these quarterbacks and a guy like Jeff Okudah to come in and be world beaters in their very first year, we got to stop. We got to stop. Quarterbacks are not going to come in their first year and light up the NFL. It's possible if you have some really good, like Trey Lance, for example, his first year starting now. His expectations are way too high. Way too high. His expectations are too high. He's not going to come in and throw in for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns and be under 10 interceptions. He's probably going to have 2,500 yards, 18 touchdowns, 11 picks. And that's okay. Because he still has to learn how to develop. Jordan Love's been sitting behind Aaron Rodgers for 3 years. And then he's being labeled a bust because he hasn't played. No, it's because you got Aaron effing Rodgers in front of you. You're not going to play if you got Aaron Rodgers in front of you. That's on the Packers. They made their decision to roll with Rodgers right now. Love just has to do his best to be ready. So I say all that because Alex Leatherwood, sure, he struggled, but I'm hoping this change of scenery helps, because it seems like once a guy gets past his first team, if a guy doesn't come out and succeed right away, like an Alex Leatherwood, like a Jeff Okudah, if Jeff Okudah gets cut from the Lions and goes somewhere else and succeeds, it's because the Lions and company weren't patient enough with him. Or maybe it's just a change of scenery. A lot of guys get a change of scenery and then actually succeed because all the previous expectations that were put out on them are gone. Exhibit A, Jalen Reagor, is a great potential subject of this topic. Alex Leatherwood could be another one. Go to the Bears, who desperately need help. Is it really going to help Justin Fields that much? Maybe. They get a lot of their help, but that's why they claimed 6 guys off of waivers. So Alex Leatherwood's still scheduled to make $14.39 million fully guaranteed as part of his rookie contract. But now he's got a new opportunity. He's got a new opportunity to go to a new team and make the most of it. And that's really all you can ask out of guys. Is to just do the best they can. If they meet the expectations of the coaching staff, excellent. If they don't, then you see moves like this, where he gets cut from the Raiders, or gets waived by the Raiders, hits the waiver wire. Bears pick it up. Bears were only number 7 on the waiver list this year. So at least 5 or 6 other teams felt that there were enough concerns, or that their offensive line was good enough. They didn't need him. All right, last NFL topic here we'll talk about today. Along with all those other moves, the Los Angeles Chargers went out and signed running back Sony Michel, who was released by the Dolphins earlier this week. Terms were not disclosed, according to ESPN. But he brings that veteran presence to now join in an offense that was one of the top offenses in the NFL last year. Austin Eckler, he'll be spelling him. And of course, on that team, you also got wide receivers Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. And a guy that we've talked about in our top 10 quarterbacks list, Justin Herbert. But throughout training camp, the Chargers just didn't really see what they wanted to out of the current group of running backs. So that was essentially why they went out and made this move. I like it. I mean, he's a guy that's going to help. He's going to help at the goal line. He's going to help give Eckler some rest in that offense. So Sony Michel brings that veteran presence. He's won a Super Bowl. He's going to help the locker room. He's gonna help out. Last year he had 845 yards, 4 touchdowns, averaged 4 yards a carry, which isn't great, but it's not bad for the Dolphins. So you got to imagine him going to a bigger offense. He's going to have a little bit of a bigger role. And depending on the health of a guy like Austin Eckler, Sony Michel might get more touches. Might get more touches, but in his career, he's hit just under 1,000 yards twice with the Patriots. That third year he was in New England, much less of a role, which kind of helped move him to his next destination. But he could be a threat out of the backfield, catching the ball. I'll have to correct myself. Last year he was with the Rams majority of the time. But a little bit of a threat out of the backfield. But I think this is going to be a nice veteran presence for them. Be a nice veteran presence for them to be able to help bolster that offense. All right, let's move on to the next topic here. Seeing as I don't have any commercials anymore. But let me know how y'all are doing today. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on some of the moves that are made around the NFL. Answer some questions. And while we do that, we're going to move on to some college football. We've been talking about college football a lot over this last week here, a couple days. Kicks off officially kicked off with week 0, but really week 1 starts this weekend. We talked about some of the big matchups last weekend. I should say, talked about some of the big matchups yesterday about this weekend, but some big news that's come out. Excuse me. Some big news that's come out in the last 12 to 14 hours. The college football playoff negotiations are about expansion have reignited. There's going to be a meeting on Friday that could create a larger field as soon as 2024. This news, Dennis Dodd from CBS talked a lot about talked about this potential move on Friday that's going to happen. A lot of the board of managers for the college football playoff are frustrated with the leadership of the FBS commissioners. There's a lot of movement going on. There's some more that I want to talk about in a minute, about more potential movement in the college football conference landscape. But the bracket would likely to expand to 12 teams under this leading proposal, which was the original concept put in front of stakeholders from the college football playoff working group in June of 2021. So in order for this thing to pass on Friday, the vote's got to be unanimous by all 11 members of the board. So that'd be very interesting. If it goes to 12, I'd be very interested to see how they map that out. Because in my opinion, if you go to 12, you're essentially doing one of two things. You're either going to allow a spot for all conference winners, which is probably the most fair but less likely. Because as much as I love giving some shout outs to the smaller schools, the group of 5 schools, my alma mater, Western Michigan University out of the MAC. I would love to have seen them in the college football playoff when they made the Cotton Bowl against Wisconsin. Of course, that game didn't go well, but there's always that conversation. The UCF when they were undefeated. You know, should they have made the college football playoff? Last year, Cincinnati, the first group of 5 team to make the playoff and then get destroyed in said playoff. So if this expands the college football playoff to 12 teams, how should they go about it? Should they have all the conference winners? Should they have all the conference winners get a shot? Or should they just do all the Power 5 schools, a group of 5 school, and then a bunch of at-large bids? That's probably most likely what would happen. You got the Power 5 schools, group of 5 school, and then at-large based on the college football playoff rankings. You just take the remaining teams that are highest left. Personally, I'm not for 12 teams. I would like 8. 12 is okay. It would grow on me. I like the idea of, so right now in college football, 4 teams, right? We've had this conversation on this show. I've had this conversation on other shows I've been on. Realistically, every year in college football right now, there are 2, maybe 3 teams that could legitimately chase a national championship. Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State this year. Clemson, you can make an argument. So of those teams, what are the, what's left for the other? You already know 3 of those spots are taken. So we're talking about a 4th spot. But if you expand the college football playoff to 12 teams, it's going to introduce more potential parity in college football. NCAA tournament did this for basketball, where they were originally 32, and then they doubled to 64. Did it take any power away from the teams that were heavily favored to win a championship every year? Absolutely not. But it does introduce the potential for more upsets, which brings more viewership, brings more revenue, brings more excitement to the sport. So I think by adding a few extra teams in the college football playoff, it's going to do exactly what the college football board of managers wants it to do, which is bring more revenue to the NCAA, bring more eyeballs to the playoff. So that's going to happen. And that's going to accomplish what they want. They really don't care as much about the product in the field, in my opinion. It's always about the money. Let's get that. Let's put that out front straight. It's always about the money, especially in college sports. It shouldn't be, but it is. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts. What form should the college football playoff expand to? Should it be 12? Should it be 8? Stay at 4? I think 12 is good. I think 12 is good. 8 would be fine for right now. 4 is probably too little because of the fact you only have legitimately 3 teams every year that are going to compete for a national championship. If you go to 12, I would like to see all Power 5 champions make the playoff, a group of 6, and then the rest. That's personally how I look at it. I would like to see that. But to kind of round out this story, there's still widespread support for the CFP media rights to go out to multiple bidders, which again drives up revenue, that's exactly what the CFP board of managers and NCAA want ultimately. And it's going to help out. It's really going to help out. If the expansion is in fact instituted in 2024, ESPN would still have the rights to all games for the final 2 years of a 12-year deal. And that 12-team playoff has been valued at $1.2 billion annually. Right now, it's at $600 million is what it's valued at. Money talks. Of course, it's going to 12. Damian, good morning. Welcome back to the show. I think it's smart expanding the playoffs to give more teams a chance to qualify. Because let's be real, there are some teams that have been looking good, but unfortunately, college rankings are unfair. I partially agree with you, but I will disagree on one thing. I don't think the college rankings are unfair. You have to go out and win games. A great example is a team that I'm repping today, Oklahoma State Cowboys. Going into the Big 12 championship game against Baylor, they had a chance to win it. They made some mistakes. They allowed Baylor to hang around. Baylor ends up winning the game by a goal line stand at the end of the game. Now both teams are trying to argue that they should be in the college football playoff, mostly Baylor. Did Baylor deserve it? Arguable. Was it fair? Absolutely, because Baylor was at least a one-loss team, if I remember correctly. If you run the table and you go undefeated and you're a Power 5 conference, that plays yourself in. What I will say is that, is there some bias in the college football playoff? Absolutely. The SEC continues to get a lot of, their schedules are weighted differently. Their schedules are weighted differently than what it seems like a Pac-12 or an ACC. You have teams in the SEC that would still probably perform. If you have a 3-win team in the SEC, you probably could move them to a different conference and they'll still be a 3-win team. Not just because, they're a 3-win team in the SEC. No, it's because you got to play it's because you got to play Alabama and Georgia and LSU. But would like a Vanderbilt or a Kentucky? Kentucky's a great example. Kentucky in the SEC. Put them in the ACC and they'll have 8-9 wins every year. No, they won't. No, they won't. Kentucky would have one good year every 3-4 years, like they do now. You could not make that argument to me that the SEC is they're very top heavy. Yes, those the Bamas, the Georgias, their athletes are far and away much better than anybody else on the field every time they step foot on the field. Being a Michigan fan, we saw that firsthand, Georgia versus Michigan. Michigan was a hell of a team last year. One of the best that the best team that Harbaugh has put out in his time in Ann Arbor. However, there's a big difference between, again, the top 2 teams in the country and everybody else. I wish college would eliminate all these bowl games, though, because I don't see why we need bowl games if there's colleges leaving conferences. So, Damian, the bowl games were put together before the whole idea of this playoff was even an actual consideration for NCAA. The bowl games provide the players, the athletes, the student athletes, an opportunity to go play in a, like an NFL stadium or they go to a destination location. It's not just about the game. It's about a lot of the things surrounding the game. They get they get to play another opponent that they hadn't played. It's a way to reward teams that have winning seasons. Now, in the last couple years, because they keep adding more bowl games, there are now too many, yes. Because then they had to saturate, well, now we'll allow 6-win teams. So a team that went 500, you're still going to give a bowl berth. I don't think that's right. And sometimes they go down to 5 and 7 teams and they base it on their academic rankings. Come on. Nebraska would get a bowl berth out of 5 and 7 team because their fan base would travel to the game. It's revenue for the cities that those bowl games are hosted. It's revenue for the stadiums, revenue for everybody. Because college football fans are some of the best fans in the world outside of soccer or world football, if that's how you choose to look at it. Those fans are so loyal to their teams, their brands. That's why Michigan plays in bowl games, big name bowl games in Florida all the time. Because that fan base, they travel in droves. They usually play in Orlando. Why? Because they travel so well. You can take any big name brand that's in a power conference. Notre Dame travels well. Florida State, Florida travels well. Texas travels really well. There's a lot of teams that travel well. So I will kind of, there are a lot of bowl games, yes. There are too many, yes. But by expanding this playoff, they're going to have to, at some point, they will have to eliminate some bowl games. Why? Because there just won't be teams that'll play. You're going to have more teams that are wanting to get into this playoff. And at some point, these bowl games are not going to make as much revenue as they previously did or expect. So just by a product of expanding the playoff, you might see some bowl games get retracted or fold or something to that effect. So I think that's what's going to happen. But I think going to a 12-team playoff is great for college football because it provides more opportunity, but it really depends on how they format this. If they don't format it right, of course, you're not going to make everyone happy. There's no perfect system that's going to make everyone happy. If you wanted to do that, you have a college football playoff, but you would have the BCS system to rank the teams for the playoff. That's, in my opinion, the best of both worlds. Because there's no bias involved like there is with the selection committee. Go look at college basketball's March Madness, the basketball tournament. Look at the college football playoff. Whenever you put together a selection committee, there's bias involved because we're humans. It's the human element. If you really want to get down to it, college football playoff format with BCS rankings, In my opinion, that's a perfect marriage. But one thing that this news, why this is getting accelerated so quickly, is the other news that Washington is now the latest team from the Pac-12 that has been in conversation with the Big Ten Conference about moving and expanding the Big Ten. This was posted by Brett McMurphy of Action Network yesterday evening. The Washington Huskies met with the Big Ten in Chicago. And the Big Ten is also targeting four Pac-12 schools. Oregon's been in conversation. They already met with the Big Ten. Now there's Washington. USC and UCLA are already in agreement to join the Big Ten in 2024. Cal, Stanford, and there was one other school. There was one other school that was in conversation for the Pac-12 as well that could be in conversation with the Big Ten. This is where college football is going. We've talked about this on the ASAP Weekly Wrap-Up on Sundays, 7:15 Eastern on the ASAP Network, in case you wanted to watch that. Host Shane and I talk about the things and latest things that happened over the last week in the world of sports. We've talked about this a lot. College football, how it's expanding, where it's going. Even a friend of mine I was on a podcast with previously. We talk about this all the time. He's a big Notre Dame guy, and you see Notre Dame's on that list. Notre Dame ain't going anywhere. Not yet. But Notre Dame ain't going anywhere. Washington's going to end up joining the Big Ten along with Oregon. And those are huge dominoes for the Big Ten. Huge dominoes for the Big Ten. This puts the Big Ten in position already. They're already the most watched conference in college football by a long shot. They almost double up the SEC from the viewing statistics that I saw a couple weeks ago. They double up the SEC. And that's saying a lot because the SEC gets a lot of publicity because they have such a good relationship with ESPN/ABC. You can throw CBS in there as well. They had that media deal with them, and now the Big Ten is going to be stepping in on the CBS network. Almost lost my train of thought. But what this does for the Big Ten now has schools all corners of the country except for the Southeast. They've got the East Coast, Rutgers, Maryland. Say what you want about their programs. It wasn't just about adding because Rutgers is the powerhouse of football. It's not because Rutgers has a good football program. They do have good academics, which is one thing the Big Ten does weigh or has weighed in their expansion until recently. But it's more about the access to the East Coast TV network. Now by adding potentially four Pac-12 schools, they have the entire West Coast covered. LA, the Northwest, Seattle area, Portland. Now that it could create a third division. You could see 3 divisions in the Big Ten. All the West Coast teams, some of the Central teams, and then you got your East Coast teams. So you'll have instead of East-West, it might be East, Central, and West. But why is this important? Why is this important that Washington is joining with Oregon to join the Big Ten? Because it is inevitable at this point. It is inevitable The NCAA will be no more at some point in the next 10 years, give or take. You have the SEC grabbing teams from the Big 12. The Big 12 is trying to scramble to grab teams, but the programs that they're getting are teams from the American Athletic Conference. They're pulling teams from the Conference USA. They're pulling teams from these different conferences that are not near the caliber of teams that you can get in other conferences. So right now you've got the SEC basically taking over the entire South. And then you've got the Big Ten, which is taking over coast to coast. East Coast, West Coast. You're going to end up having 2, maybe 3 super conferences. ACC might be the 3rd super conference. But right now you're going to see 2 super conferences, and those 2 conferences are going to have so much leverage in their media rights deals, in their branding. They're going to have so much leverage against the NCAA that they are going to inevitably come up with some plan to break away from the NCAA. They won't have to worry about the rules, the regulations, all that stuff. They won't have to worry about that with the NCAA anymore if they do their own thing. And I think that's inevitably what's going to happen. The next big domino that was mentioned on there is Notre Dame. And I'll just say this about Notre Dame. Notre Dame is not going anywhere just yet. They still have their media deal with NBC. When that comes up due, I'll be very interested to see how Notre Dame plays this, because they're still having back and forth with the Big Ten. That's been going on for years. Ever since the Big Ten expanded and allowed Penn State back in the 90s or late 80s. But going back to then, the Big Ten wanted Notre Dame. It made sense academically, geographically, athletically. All of it made sense. But the Notre Dame Fighting Irish are going to get left behind, which is why they did a partial deal with the ACC. We'll join you in every sport but football because Notre Dame's a football school. We're a nationally known brand and we're independent. We can do it. The way the football landscape is going, they have to join a conference or they will get left behind. They have to join a conference. But if they join any conference, I think it will be the ACC. And it's because I want to make sure I got this right, because I was talking about this with a friend of mine this morning since it came out. Notre Dame, I think it's most likely they stay with the ACC because they're going to hardball the Big Ten, and the Big Ten will not budge. The Notre Dame brand is much more valuable for the ACC, to pay more money to keep Notre Dame around. The Big Ten, by the time they expand with all the Pac-12 teams, they will have so many marketable brands, schools, and so much revenue coming in from coast to coast, especially if you add Oregon. Oregon's a big one. Is it bigger than USC? Depends on who you ask. USC is the more historic brand, and they have deep roots of fandom. Oregon has been really good over the last 20 years. So they're the more recent big name brand. And that's where Nike headquarters is located. They have a big, they always have a big, what's the word I'm looking for? They have a agreement. They basically do a lot of things together. They collaborate. That's the word I'm looking for. Man, not enough coffee. Yes, I get. But that's they have that with Nike, and that's a big door potentially to open. The reason I say that the ACC would take on Notre Dame before Notre Dame joins the Big Ten. Notre Dame's already played this stupid cat and mouse game with the Big Ten for years, 30 years, probably longer than that. We want you to join the conference. No, we're good. We make a bunch of money on our own. We don't want to share the revenue with anyone. But now with the media deal and with all these schools, you're going to have a program like, I don't know, rival Purdue that is going to make so much more money than Notre Dame. So when Notre Dame comes to the bargaining table to say, hey, yeah, we think we want to join the Big Ten. Boom, they throw their offer out. The Big Ten is going to laugh at them. Legitimately laugh at them. And that's why I think the ACC would take them on first. Not only because a question in the comments here. Looks like I was spacing out for a second. You go on Show Solo and you produce the show and you host the show. You got to do a lot of different things. I don't have someone to bounce it off to be able to add some things here while we're live on ASAP Network on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. So I appreciate those that are joining in, commenting. Damien, one of the guys that's here every day. Appreciate it. Even though we give him a hard time. But I think part of why the ACC will take on Notre Dame, it'll be, again, about money. It'll be about money because that's what talks. Notre Dame's going to get a better deal with the ACC. And I mentioned the marketable brands. You're bringing in all these teams from the Pac-12. You've got Michigan, Ohio State. You've got Wisconsin's probably the next tier down, but then you've got Penn State's kind of on that tier 1, tier 2, like tier 1.5. Michigan State's probably tier 2, along with like Minnesota. Indiana moved from like tier 1 to tier 2. But there's so many marketable brands with the Big Ten. The ACC doesn't have as many, especially with football. Football, you've got Clemson, Florida State, Miami. That's about it. Of course, the rest of the sports, you got North Carolina and Duke in basketball. I'm probably missing a school or two. But that's a big reason. But that right there can tell you the ACC will be willing to pay Notre Dame more money than the Big Ten would. Do I think with these schools switching conferences will affect the NI deal and how? Not right now, but ultimately, yes, Damien. Because what I talked about a few minutes ago, this is what these schools, these conferences are doing is they are positioning themselves to break away from the NCAA. When that happens, NIL is going to skyrocket because they'll have less limitations on what they are allowed to do, what they can and cannot do. So that right there, will NIL get affected now or in the next couple years? Probably a bit, because more teams are going to, and that's really school-based right now. It's really school-based because a team like, what's a team that did announcement for NIL deal recently? Was it Texas A&M? I think it was Texas A&M. A big NIL deal, right? So they talk about how much they're putting into that kind of stuff. Well, Michigan has been on the opposite end of that. And they're like, no, they're trying to stand they're trying to stand their ground of we're the Michigan brand. We're one of the top public universities in the country. When you come here, you're getting national exposure with one of the most well-known brands in college football history. We're extremely marketed. You're on nationally televised games. You're getting extremely good education. Blah 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 blah. Michigan's shooting themselves in the foot by not following suit to an extent on this NIL revolution that's going on. They did then, however, roll out this NIL program where fans can help support athletes at Michigan through their NIL deal. I know other schools do it, but it's laughable to me that one of the biggest revenue-making colleges and universities in all of North America is not utilizing their own money to raise their NIL budget. And they're like, no, we need crowdfunding, man. Oh man, this NIL deal thing is so challenging for us. We really need your help. The hell out of here with that. Get out of here with that, Michigan. Come on. So I don't think right now it changes. If anything, the more marketable a conference is in an ideal situation, I think, by the Big Ten adding all these West Coast schools, that could affect the overall NIL because schools might want to go to a Washington more than they would now. Or Oregon does a really good job recruiting. USC has a huge athletic budget. That won't really get affected. UCLA maybe. But there's a few, I think there's a few factors in there as these conferences continue to grow that you could see that happening with the NIL. Not necessarily a hot take, but I think the next conference that's going to get purged, or I should say continue to get purged, is the Big 12. I don't know if it's in the SEC, but the next step in the evolution of a Big 10, especially with their strategy, I would not be surprised if they pull a couple of teams from the Big 12. I wouldn't be surprised if they pull a couple teams from the Big 12. Because if I were to look at Big 12, because there's one of the teams that I've talked a little bit about on other shows and talked with a few people about, I would not be surprised if like Kansas have been rumored to join the Big 10 at some point. And from a basketball standpoint, that's an amazing match. That's an amazing match. I would love to see Kansas basketball in the Big 10. 100%. You got a natural rivalry with Nebraska. And I know Nebraska's not a basketball school, but you kind of get my idea. But for football, that's terrible. Baylor, I've seen rumored as being the next target from a non-Pac-12 conference. Baylor would ideally be my front runner to join the Big 10. I would love to see Baylor join the Big 10. They've been hot in football. They've been hot in basketball, college basketball. That one makes a lot of sense to me, and they can start diving into that Southwest, true Midwest network. A lot of the Texas schools, that's the next market that the Big Ten probably will target once they've finished out with the West Coast. Texas is the next one. The Texas market is big. So I wouldn't be surprised to see. I don't think any of those Texas schools would join, but Baylor is probably that big name on the list. But coming into college football, we'll talk about this on we'll talk a little bit. We're talking college football betting tomorrow. So tomorrow, we're going to have Gary Green from BetVegas.tv joining ASAP in the morning. We'll be joining Pride and Company. I will not be on tomorrow. But Gary Green from BetVegas.tv is going to talk some college football betting with us tomorrow. So make sure you tune into that on ASAP in the morning on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. All right, I'm gonna change some gears real quick. And we're gonna talk a little bit about some NFC, AFC West. And then tomorrow we'll have more conversation with the other guys with Pride and Ron, maybe Frankie. Those guys will be talking some little bit of college football and talk some NFL because we are a week away. 1 week. We have the Bills and the Rams kick off Thursday night football on the NFL Network, and I think on Amazon. But moving forward, the NFC and AFC West. So Shane and I on the ASAP weekly wrap-up show on Sunday night, 7:15 Eastern, we've already gone over the NFC West. We talked a little bit about them and where we kind of feel like teams are going to fall. You know, who got better, who needs to do some work. And I think the NFC West is going to be a little challenging, a little bit kind of like last year. So last year, Arizona got off to such a hot start, and then they kind of like faltered. You got the suspension to Hopkins. That game that didn't help out. I'm bringing up my notes from that show because I have a ton of notes from that show, if I remember it correctly. Oh no, that's AFC East. But let me know your thoughts in the comments here about where you think teams are going to fall. Last year, the standings, the Rams went 12-5, Cardinals 11-6. They had the hot start. 49ers went 10-7, made the playoffs. They started off slow and then came on hot at the end of the year. Seahawks finished 7-10. Arizona started the year at 7-0, went 4-7 the rest of the way. And like I said, the 49ers started 3-5. Finished 10-7, made the playoffs. 49ers made it to the NFC title game with Jimmy Garoppolo at the helm, which if you were watching earlier this week, we talked a little bit about Jimmy G and his situation. He had been granted to seek a trade from another suitor and came back and found nothing. So essentially what he then did is turned around and said, all right, we'll restructure my contract and put more guaranteed for this year. It's $6.5 million guaranteed for this year and becomes the highest paid backup in the NFL. It's Trey Lance's team. They've already come out and said that. A lot of heat has been thrown around at Trey Lance in all the different group chats that I'm in, whether it's ASAP or Off the Ball Network. A lot of heat's getting thrown at Trey Lance. Some saying he's going to get benched after the first couple weeks. I think you see some struggle with Trey Lance. However, if this is truly Trey Lance's team, Jimmy Garoppolo should only play for the 49ers if Trey Lance is hurt and cannot go. The 49ers need to now ride or die with Trey Lance. If he can play all 17 games, he needs to play all 17 games. For better or for worse. That's the position that the 49ers have put themselves in. So Trey Lance is now in a spot where he's got a lot of heat on him. But one thing that really helped out the 49ers last year, they had a strong defense, they had a strong run game. San Francisco. And now this year, they've lost some pieces. They lost who am I thinking of? Who's one of the running backs who went to Miami? Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert goes to Miami. But you had Elijah Mitchell, led the team last year, 23 years old, young running back. The way that Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, I said Mike Shanahan. That's his daddy. Kyle Shanahan, the way that they run that offense, Deebo Samuel's now all in, got his contract. Now with how all that is going to come together, the offense and defense, they had the seventh best offense in terms of yards, 13th best offense in points for. They had a top 10 defense against the pass and the run. That defense can stay consistent. You hear this theme a lot with me. That defense builds a great foundation for a young quarterback that is still learning how to find his way in the NFL and develop. So for Trey Lance, the 49ers can continue to have a stout defense and they can continue their top 10 rushing offense. Mix that in with the style of offense that Shanahan likes to run. Trey Lance could be successful. And I said this earlier in the show. Trey Lance is not going to come out and throw 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, under 10 picks. He's not going to do that. So stop putting those expectations on him. Trey Lance could have a 2,500 year with 18 touchdowns and 11 picks, and that's okay. That's successful. Because it depends on when if he throws picks late in games, of some of those, of course, that's going to hurt your team. But he doesn't have to go out there and try to be. He doesn't have to go out there and try to be a guy who's going to, be a Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, throwing for 4,000 or 5,000 yards, Justin Herbert. He doesn't have to go out and do that. He's still developing as a quarterback. But because of that, you got to ride or die with him. You can't pull the yo-yo thing on him and go, 3 weeks, he didn't play well. We're going to play Jimmy G for 2 weeks and then put him back in. That's like in the minor leagues. That's like in the minor leagues for baseball. If you have a guy like the Tigers have Spencer Torkelson, struggled as in his first stint at the Tigers. They sent him down to AAA. Still did okay. They pulled him back up. You got to do one or the other. If a guy's not ready, a guy's not ready. But the 49ers feel that Trey Lance is ready. They hand him the keys. They told Jimmy G he can go look for a trade. Didn't find one. So they said, okay, you can come back, but you got to be the backup. So if you make that move, that declaration as the 49ers, you have to ride or die with Trey Lance. Start him all 17 games, assuming he's healthy. If not, you are setting your franchise back. You can get a really good gauge on where Trey Lance is in his progression by playing him all 17 games. You got to let him take his lumps. You got to let him make the decisions and make the mistakes and then learn from them. If he makes the mistakes and doesn't learn from them, that tells you everything you need to know. Because then he's clearly not your franchise quarterback. But if he can make those adjustments, make those things, it only can be done by playing him the entire season. You can't pull the yo-yo and play him 3 or 4 weeks at a time. He struggles. Okay, we'll put Jimmy G in, do that. That's not setting your franchise up for success. So I will give credit to the 49ers for making that declaration in the offseason that this is Trey Lance's team. Now you got to stick to your guns. No matter how much the fan base gives you hell this year, you gotta stick with it. But the other team, and I showed Damien's comment here earlier, but Damien's got the Rams and the Broncos or the Chargers win the West. I would pick one of the two from the Chargers or the Broncos if we're making predictions. But I think in this year, so what we've seen from teams in the NFC West, you know what you're going to get with the Rams. If Stafford can continue to stay healthy, in my opinion, he's the most underrated quarterback of his career. And when he went to the Rams the first year, what does he do? He balls out, goes and wins a Super Bowl. Now we know he's got problems with the shoulders, and he's got some potential injury history that he's dealing with. But if he can stay healthy, that offense is still going to be lights out. You've spent money on that defense. The Rams can, it's a long way to do what the Rams did last year, to go through, win the Super Bowl, have a short off season to get healthy, and then come back and do it all over again with 17 games, not 16 games. So the Rams, it's a really hard road to repeat. But the Rams, I think, can do just enough in that division. The Seahawks are not going to be good. I saw somebody put out that I think the Seahawks can, what was it? The Seahawks get like 6-7 wins or something like that. Get out of here. They got Geno Smith and Drew Lock at quarterback. Geno Smith won the job. That's an indictment on Drew Lock, who was a starter in Denver and then got benched. And then went to Seattle, and now Seattle's like, oh yeah, we can turn Drew Lock around. He's great. Fantastic. The guy can't hit the broadside of a barn. And now Geno Smith's your quarterback. You got issues with injuries at the running back position. Is Kenneth Walker going to be the guy to be your next cowbell running back? He has to be. Rashad Penny, I think he's still nursing injury. You got Noah Fant. That's going to help out the quarterback position a lot. What's the defense look like? I don't think the Seahawks are going to be good. I really don't. I think they finished last in the division. I think I would put my money, my predictions in the NFC West. I would put 1, the Rams. 2's going to be the 49ers. I think that might surprise a few people. Three's the Cardinals, and 4's the Seahawks. That's how I got the NFC West looking. Rams, 49ers, Cardinals, Seahawks. Everybody is making a huge deal about the fact that, well, Jimmy G wasn't the guy, but they still went 10-7 and made the NFC title game. People forget that. They went 10-7, made the NFC title game with a top 10 defense. And Jimmy G is your quarterback. If Trey Lance can perform at the same level as Jimmy G, I think the 49ers would be not impressed, but they would be optimistic. They would be hopeful. If Trey Lance in his first season has a season like Jimmy Garoppolo, statistically, I think the 49ers are comfortable with moving forward with him. Damien says, I don't think Trey Lance is that guy yet, but at the same time, I don't trust Jimmy G as a starter either. He's made too many mistakes as a starter and can't stay healthy at all, which is why they're making the move to Trey Lance. You have a guy waiting in the wings that you drafted in the first round. Some think that he was maybe overdrafted. Maybe it was a bit of a reach, but that was the move that the 49ers felt they needed to make. And 100%, Trey Lance might not be that guy yet, but that's the key word in that sentence, yet. If he can, that's the recipe for a young quarterback. The recipe for a young quarterback is you have a strong run game, you have some weapons on offense, and you have a stout defense. The 49ers have all of those things. They don't need Trey Lance to go out and beat the world. They don't need him to throw 4,000 or 5,000 yards. They don't. Damien's got the Rams, Cardinals, 49ers, and Seahawks. I could see that too. One thing that we've noticed with Cliff Kingsbury and the Arizona Cardinals, every year in his tenure, the end of the season always struggles. He did it at Texas Tech too. Get hot early in the season and then fade away in the back end of the season. I couldn't tell you how many times Texas Tech would come out to like 4-5-0 starts, touting the best passing offense. They ran that air raid offense. And then later in the season, when they actually played meaningful games, choke. So I think the Cardinals, especially missing DeAndre Hopkins, you saw how that affected them last year. They're missing DeAndre Hopkins for the first third of the season. 6 games, I believe it is. I think that's going to affect the Cardinals. You couple that with the fact that Cliff Kingsbury can't make late season adjustments. I think the Cardinals have the potential to take a step back, and you could see Rams, 49ers, Cardinals, Seahawks. But if Kyler Murray can continue to play the way he had played, and there's a new Call of Duty coming out in November. Don't tell him. Don't tell him. Guy skimps out on his film study to play Call of Duty. Hey, look, I get it. I was a big gamer for a long time. But I get it. But if you're a guy that you get paid a job to do a task, and you're skimping out on that task to play Call of Duty or do something else, it's going to show. But that's how I look at it. The Rams, 49ers, Cardinals, Seahawks for the NFC West. Now moving on to the AFC West. This, in my opinion, is going to be the hardest division. Hardest division in the NFL this year. And not like the hardest division like the NFC East, where they're just, at one point, they were all bad. But I think the AFC West is going to be one of the hardest divisions because they're all getting better. They're all good. I already talked a little bit about Denver earlier in the show, talking about Russell Wilson and his monster contract. But the rest of the division, the team that I'm paying very, very close attention to is the Las Vegas Raiders. Last year they went 10-7, second in the AFC West division. They lost the wild card to the Cincinnati Bengals, 26-19. Their offense and defense, they had a great passing offense. They were top 6, number 6 in yards. Didn't throw a ton of touchdown passes. Middle of the road and interceptions thrown. Their rushing offense was one of the worst in the NFL by yards and yards per attempt. So yards per carry, not very good. Defense was middle of the road. So are they going to be able to make the move and take the step forward? Can Derek Carr take that step forward now that he's added Devontae Adams in a shocker of a move by the Green Bay Packers. Are they going to take that next step forward? Because you're missing Henry Ruggs III. If you haven't seen why, I'll just say go Google it. Just go Google it if you don't already know. But they still got Darren Waller at tight end, Hunter Renfrow, wide receiver. Now you got Devontae Adams. They lost Marcus Mariota as their backup to go to Atlanta. But he didn't really even play much anyway. Derek Carr is now 30, crowding 31. This is his year. I think this is part of their window. Because Denver took a big step forward. The Chiefs are still the Chiefs to an extent. You got the Chiefs at... I know I put your comment up here for a while, Damian, so everybody can see it. Broncos, Chargers, Raiders, Chiefs? Oh, Damian. I appreciate you joining the conversation, but that's why pride gets on your ass. You're saying that the Chiefs went 12-5 last year, lost in the conference championship game in a nail biter to the Bengals, and they're going to finish last in the AFC West? Man, that's rough. That's rough. I see it slightly differently. And this is, like I said, this is a really, really hard. This is a really, really hard division to predict. But I've got the Chargers. 2 have got the Chiefs. And then Broncos, Raiders. I don't think the Raiders, they'll still have a good offense, but they've got to get better in the run game. They've got to get better on defense. I don't know if they're going to do that. I don't think they'll do that. But the Chiefs, yes, they lost Tyreek Hill. Took a top off of defense. Tyreek Hill led the team with 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, over 100 catches. You still have Kelsey, and a guy that I think I wouldn't call him. He's kind of a sleeper pick. Rookie wide receiver Sky Moore out of Western Michigan. I think he's going to be that guy that's going to kind of fill in that role of Tyreek Hill. I think he's a guy that's going to fill in that role, in all honesty. But looking over their offense, wide receivers, they've only got 5 on the roster, but they went and got Juju Smith-Schuster. They went and got Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I can never say his name right. Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They went and got him. He's a big-bodied guy. He was a big target. He's a big target for Aaron Rodgers last year. But you've got him. You still got Mecole Hardman, Travis Kelce. Hardman, he's got to step up a little bit more, I think, if he wants to take that next step in progression. But between him and Sky Moore, those are a couple of shifty guys that I think can get open. But Juju Smith-Schuster is going to get a lot of catches, I think. I really do. So that's why I think it's really hard, and I think it's going to be a very closely contested division. But that's why it was so hard to pick. But I think the Chargers are just making bigger steps forward than the Chiefs are. But I think it'll be a tight race either way. Broncos are going to make or have made a lot of moves. They do need to make sure they've got enough weapons around Russell Wilson now. But I think even an improvement for them, they'll probably get more than 7 wins. But I still think that means they finish 3rd in the division. That's how good this division is going to be. That's how good this division is going to be. I got a lot of love for the Seahawks. My fiance is a huge Seahawks fan, as you can see. Got a lot of love for the Seahawks. They're going to struggle this year. Big time. They're going to big time struggle this year. So, all right. I'm going to round out the show here. Today, the back end of the week. Tomorrow is Friday. Friday, we've got on the show Gary Green from BetVegas.tv. He's going to be joining ASAP in the morning. Tomorrow will be Pride and Company. I will not be available tomorrow for the show. However, make sure that if you want to learn more about one of our best new partners, Gary Green of BetVegas.tv, we'll be interviewing him on the morning show tomorrow. If you want to check that out, make sure that you're following ASAP on all platforms or any platform that you watch your shows. Feel bad for me already. Why is that, Damien? Don't feel bad for me. My life is amazing. Don't feel bad for me. But tomorrow, we'll have Gary Green from BetVegas. Make sure that you like and share the stream. Anytime you see ASAP Sports come across your feed, whether you're watching on Facebook or Twitter, if you're tuning in on Twitch or on YouTube. We got a few people watching on all platforms right now, so appreciate y'all tuning in to ASAP in the morning. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. with Gary Green from BetVegas. But later on today, we may have Afternoon Blitz coming up at 1 p.m. Eastern and Easy Money at 3 p.m. Eastern. Lots of great shows here on the All Sports All Plays Network, so make sure that you check out All Sports All Plays on any platform that you watch. Lions fan and Seahawks fan, that's tough. For me, yes, I've had a lifetime of misery as a Lions fan, but hey, they're on the upswing. Yesterday, we talked about the NFC North. I think the Lions take a big step forward this year, doubling up their win total. They only had 3 last year, so it's not hard. But the Seahawks have had some success in the past, just not recently. But later on today, we have the Afternoon Blitz and Easy Money here on All Sports All Plays Network. Make sure you tune in, like and share the stream. And tomorrow, like I said, Pride and Company will be here. I will be off. I will see you all on Monday. So have a great weekend. Oh, shout out to the Oklahoma State Cowboys. They got Central Michigan today. Being a Western Michigan alum, I can't say the word live on air, but go Pokes, beat the Chips. Have a great day. Have a great weekend, everyone. And we'll see you on all ASAP in the morning, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern. Have a great day.
All Sports All Plays. Yeah. All Sports All Plays. All Sports All Plays. 365, we're making a plays. You talking the game, get you to the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All Sports All Plays.